Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of the Emmy and One Mosaic podcast. My guest with me today is Emily. I'm so excited to have Emily on. We have become super close and over the summer connected over a very bizarre topic, but actually it's now very relevant, which is gut health. And I'm going to let Emily share a little bit about her journey, what has brought us together in terms of everything gut related, and see if she has any kind of wisdoms or nuggets of gold to share with you today. So, Emily, I will hand over to you. It is such a delight to have you on. I'm so excited, and I would love for you to just kind of take us through your journey with your health and your gut health, particularly. Like, how have you got to where you are now? What are you up to now?
Oh, thank you, Lizzie. That was the nicest introduction I've ever had. Um, so I've been thinking about this. Obviously, I knew I was going to come and talk to you about this today, and really, I can trace it back right back to childhood because the way we look at food and nutrition now wasn't the way we looked at it then. And it was really just getting food in, getting healthy food in if you possibly can. And diet was a word that you'd use about counting calories or trying to slim. It wasn't like the all-encompassing word we use now for using food as a beneficial thing for your whole health. So that was my kind of attitude towards food when I was younger. And then as I got older, I had children in my 20s, and after my second daughter became quite depressed and anxious, and that really manifested itself as not being able to eat, and just the thought of food or eating, the action of eating was very, very difficult. And I lost a lot of weight, became very, very underweight at the time, and nobody quite knew what to do with me. So off I went to the doctors, and they said that basically it was depression, and that the best way to treat it would be with antidepressant drugs, because a side effect of those, I think it was Prozac, and a side effect of that is to stimulate appetite. So they gave me Prozac and sent me on my merry way, which did absolutely nothing except to numb me out even more. So that didn't last very long. I couldn't get on with that at all. So I stopped taking those and really just stayed like that for a really long time. And then kind of life goes past. You get the montage of the years go past, and my marriage ended. And at that point, I kind of thought I need to really take stock of things. Where's my life going? What am I doing? What do I want it to look like? And I realized that a lot of the problem was anxiety, just fear. And I'd had a point where I was so suppressed by anxiety that I found it a struggle to leave the house. So even eating wasn't even a big deal. It was just trying to bring up my children. So I kind of had this realization that a lot of what was going on with me was anxiety based, and did a lot of work around that, came into the kind of work that you and I do together, looking at ourselves and all of that kind of thing, doing a lot of yoga and really feeling into our bodies and what's going on there, and learning the language of the body. And what I learned was that the way I thought was normal to feel, what I thought was normal in my body, really isn't normal. And I had a lot of discomfort, particularly after eating food, and bloating, really awful bloating, cramps, muscle spasms in my gut, constipation. I mean, I've looked at more constipation recipes than it's probably good to admit. I could probably write a book just on that, because it dominates your life if you have those symptoms, and not sleeping properly, and then this cycle of not wanting to eat because I felt awful, but then coming through the other side of it and being really hungry, so eating the wrong things probably, and just having that awareness that this isn't how you have to feel. My body's telling me quite clearly and quite loudly, something's not right here. So it's time to look at what that is. So the change from the anxiety and all of that to realization was just getting curious, allowing myself to just explore and talk about it and ask questions. You have always been my number one question asker, and we'll sit there and you'll ask a question and I'm writing all the notes down from the answers you get. But that was the biggest thing, I think, in recent years, certainly, was acknowledging the anxiety. That's fine, that's one thing, but then moving past that and into curiosity and trying things out, just figuring out by experimentation what is good, what does a good day feel like. So that felt like a lot of things, but that's been my journey.
It is all gold. It is all gold. And I love how your cat came on screen just to the point where you were talking about being curious, and, and this little like cat's head came on, and I was like, that is one very curious cat who's come to learn about gut health. So here I am scribbling down notes because I don't even know where to start. But gosh, there's so much that I could pick up on there. I think I'm going to almost go backwards in reverse chronological order. You mentioned about getting curious and experimenting, trying things out, which can feel like a really hard and scary thing to do, because most people ask the question, where do you start? Like, where actually do you start? When there is lots of information, lots of people speaking about the same topic with different opinions. As you said, when you were younger, food was taught in one way, and now it's taught completely differently. So how did you start? Like, what was the first step that you took?
Well, that was my problem, that I kind of started to do the thing you shouldn't do, which is Google. Google was not my friend, because there was so much information on there, and the internet's not really pleased, the facts aren't checked when you're just looking stuff up on the internet. So I was immediately overwhelmed by all of these different opinions and different suggestions and ways to go about it. There's a different diet for every day of the year, and it was, like you say, just instant information overload. So what I did was come to somebody who I know has already done a lot of research and tried a lot of things out in their own health, and is very informed and intelligent about how they go about it, which was you. And we had lots of conversation about it, and you went away and thought about it and came back to me with a suggestion to try an exclusion diet for a while. And 3 years ago, I would have thought, there's no way I can organise my life around this. It's too hard. I'm too stuck in my ways. I can't get my head around not eating bread or rice or pasta. They're like the three staples of my life. But actually, it wasn't that difficult at all. It just required a little bit of forward planning and putting the different elements out wasn't hard at all. I didn't really miss them, which told me something instantly, because I wasn't craving all of this stuff. So that was the way that I sifted through all the misinformation, was to go to somebody I really trusted, who I know has already walked this path for a little while, and just ask, Lizzie, what would you do?
And well, I was delighted because you give me a microphone, I literally will not shut up. So it was an absolute pleasure. And I know I was thinking back actually to that very conversation, which, gosh, is actually a little while ago now. And you asked me, because you knew that I'd done various different things, experimented with exclusion. I'd also done the kind of thing that feels at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is like skip all the trial and error and just go straight for the blood tests and the kind of, the hard science. Was there any part of you, because you've opted, I believe, literally just for exclusion diet, so you are going quite literally on what your body's telling you. You don't have evidence to back it up, you don't have any blood results. Is there any part of you that's curious to know like what they might be, or are you really content with just following kind of your body's cues and your intuition, quite literally following your gut?
I think for now, I'm 100% focused on what my body's telling me, and that's in this area, but other areas too, like stress and sleep and mood and energy levels. That was the first amazing result I had, was noticing that my energy levels had just gone through the roof compared to what they had been. I previously felt very sluggish, very slow, very not sleepy, but like I felt like things took a while, and that within probably a week of cutting out, I think my suspicion is it's the gluten, but within a week of starting the exclusion diet, my energy levels were completely different. They went from about a 4 or a 5 to about a 9, and I felt that the energy was sustaining itself through the day. So I'm thinking I probably don't need to have a piece of paper to tell me anything. I can measure it quite well. It's quite obvious to me where the change is, but also I am curious to know whether doing a test like that would match my feeling in my body. But I don't know that I would change anything off the back of a test. It would just be interesting to see if the piece of paper and my feelings matched. But I wouldn't be necessarily guided by it.
That's really interesting. They're definitely two very different approaches, and I myself am learning to bring them together.
Yeah,
which is valuable. But I normally say to people, if I could only choose, the exclusion or the kind of the tests and everything, I'd go with the body stuff. I'd go with the intuition. Like that seems to bring me back better results, because the problem is that sometimes the evidence and the blood tests and things, it brings back information that we can't quite compute in our head, and that then causes stress and anxiety, which in turn then upsets the gut, and that's going to be more disruptive than necessarily the foods that were causing the problem in the first place. So I think that actually leads me really nicely on to my next question, which is about kind of stress, anxiety. You've mentioned, do you believe that you would have had the results you've had if you hadn't got on top of your stress levels, and if you weren't managing your anxiety really actively with the stuff we do together, inner work, yoga, meditation, everything like that? Do you think that, yeah, your results would be as quick and as amazing as they've been?
No, definitely not, because the anxiety was so debilitating at times and so all-consuming. It had become my whole personality, and it ran my life. It dictated everything I did, everywhere I went, if I spoke to somebody or not. It completely ran my life for me. I wasn't in the driver's seat of my life during the really bad years. So if I hadn't have acknowledged that and had that realization 10 or so years ago, even before I came into the work that you and I do together, I wouldn't have got to the stage of feeling like there would be something better, or there's more to life, or any of that stuff. I wouldn't have got there, because my personality was, I have anxiety, and that was all there was to say about me, really, at that point. So it couldn't have happened. There's just no.
You've just made me think about quite a big topic that I talk about in MEM1 and health, which is like what we consider normal. And that word is such a problematic one, because what is normal, and is there such a thing as normal, and does normal mean good or healthy? And in my opinion, no, it doesn't. And you mentioned before about some of those really severe symptoms you had, the bloating, the cramps, the spasms, which you just thought were normal. And I'm going to link it to what you've just said about, your personality was, I have anxiety, so the anxiety was normal. Do you think that without that inner work side of things that made you question and made you actually step out of normal, that you would be where you are now?
No, because it wasn't about permission or anything like that. It wasn't like I saw the work you were doing and I thought, oh, then it's okay for me to explore this, or I can ride on Lizzie's coattails. It was, you know, what you were doing was inspiring in its uniqueness, but it was I don't know how to explain it. It was like a spark that was always there. It was always in me. I've always loved to learn. I've always had that passion for learning new things, but I'd never applied it to myself, because I was scared to. I was frightened of what I might find. So I had to go through the process of the inner work and the getting to know myself and starting to really love myself before I could come through the other side of the fear and into curiosity and wonder and fascination and all of those things that is true about learning about the human body and the human heart and the human mind. Because it really is fascinating once you start poking around in there.
It is fascinating. And I always think of the expression, or it's like opening a can of worms, which is actually not a particularly like positive way of thinking about it. It's like a Pandora's box, but in such a good way.
Yeah.
And I love that you've been able to share that, because I think one of the biggest blocks for people to kind of take authority over their own health and to recognize their own agency is that it's so unknown. There is such a need for validation, and it's once you start, it's not easy, And if
No.
it were easy, we'd all be doing it. No one would have these symptoms. Um, so I'm really glad you said that, because there is a huge element of this healing work that I do, the kind that you do as well, that requires that awareness of self. And I'm yet to meet really anyone who's approaching health from an alternative point of view, but who understands, where the mind and the emotions come into it, and the perception of self. So I think you've made such a valid point there. Oh my gosh, Emily, I could talk to you all day. I have to wrap up really soon. And so the final question I'm going to ask you is, what would be one thing that you would tell to a younger version of yourself that, you didn't know back then that you know now that you feel is really important and that listeners might kind of appreciate hearing?
See, I'm tempted to say something silly like, stop eating bread. I might say that, but what I would say to maybe the 20-year-old version of myself is that you have this huge appetite, young Emily, for finding things out and learning things, and you get so excited when you find out something that fascinates you. Keep hold of that. Keep hold of that part of yourself and don't let it go. And whatever thread you pick up that fascinates you, don't be shamed into putting it down. Follow it until you get to the end of it, or it no longer serves you, or you're bored of it. But don't put it down because you think it's wrong to follow it.
That was so beautifully put. Incredibly poetic.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway, Emily, I can't thank you enough for just coming on and sharing from your heart, which you always do. And it is so clear to me why we've met, how we've met, and I'm just really, I feel very humbled to be able to help you in this way, in the ways that you have as well with me, my journey, and my health too. And I wish you all the best for the future with your gut health, with everything that you're doing. And whilst I've forgotten to ask you about honey this time, there is now a very valid reason for me to get you back on in the future. So I am super excited, and thank you again.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's a lifelong ambition to come on someone's podcast. So I say lifelong, how long podcasts been around? But for that long anyway, I've always wanted to do this. So thank you, and good luck with the rest of your podcasts.